Hello there, my name is Sixo, but more on that later, as right now it's time to check out this beast. Let's go! MB-15 Naval Commander is the latest release from popular third-party outfit Fans Hobby and sees them tackling one of the most iconic designs from Transformers Armada. It's Optimus Prime. Though Fans Hobby already have a sizable back catalogue of Generation 1 inspired releases, this is the first time they've branched out to the Unicron Trilogy, which is something a lot of fans are very excited for. Optimus Prime is of course the leader of the Autobots throughout all three series in the trilogy, and for many his original Armada design is one of the most memorable, particularly that impressive combined mode transformation. It looks like Fans Hobby have gone to some lengths in recreating Optimus's look from the cartoon, albeit with their usual stylistic flair, and it will be a real treat to finally see a rendition of this character in Masterpiece style. Even better, Fans Hobby have also teased more Unicron Trilogy toys, with an Armada Megatron and an Energon Optimus also on the way before too long. Let's hope for good things today then. Last thing before we begin, today's video comes courtesy of TF Source, so I'll put a link to their site in the video description. The plan for today is to give you my first impressions before getting a full photo review up on their blog soon. So here is Naval Commander in his box, and my word have I been excited for this one. Absolutely cannot wait to see this thing in hand today. I've been really looking forward to it. And the box itself is gorgeous. Really nice homage to the original Armada packaging. I mean, it's not like a complete dead ringer, but it's you know, stylistically, it's very kind of on point and just looks absolutely fantastic, I think. You know, even stuff like the side flaps here and whatever else, it all kind of has that distinct early 2000s flair, which is just kind of unmistakable, isn't it? I'm sure for a lot of people this is going to feel like a little dose of nostalgia. I mean, even the back with those product shots, it's all kind of designed and laid out to kind of give you that vibe, right? To like really kind of recall that original packaging. And you know, I get super excited whenever I see third parties trying to replicate stuff like this, and you know, for me obviously it's typically I get that vibe with Generation 1 packaging because that's what I grew up with, but you know, even with this there's a real vibe there. It's really something. But of course it's the toy itself that we're really here to talk about, so let's get this thing open. Now I think there's going to be quite a few people that are curious about this one, probably even a fair few people that kind of grew up with Armada or had that as their Transformers that have never even gone in on third party before but are interested to see this one. So you know, I'll make sure to do a good review and tell you everything about this toy and all the features it's got. How about that? So, and here he is in the clamshell looking mighty fine, and of course you get the instructions and a little character card as well. So included in the box, of course, you get the cab section of the truck, which is the smaller robot, as we'll see. And before we move forward, I want to do one of the most satisfying bits of all. Then of course you get the trailer section as well, which transforms into his trousers. You get these two little blue pieces, which yeah, no, I got nothing. I got no idea what they are, but we'll find out. You get these 6 little red missiles, which load into the front of his truck mode. You get this pair of gold accessories, which is kind of like an alternate pair of ears for the combined mode. You can swap them out if you want and give them a bit more of a kind of toyetic look. You get this little alternate set of eyes. That's what that is. It's again for the combined mode. The standard ones are red, but you get this transparent kind of clear pair as well. And of course, you get his little Minicom partner, which is meant to represent Sparkplug, who's looking very nice indeed. Love it. Oh yeah, and you get his big old gun as well. Almost forgot about it. Now it's on the bottom of the vehicle mode, so clearly there's a bit of weapon storage there, which is quite cool, and it comes packaged like that as well, just so you don't forget that it's there. So yeah, right at the box, this thing looks pretty amazing actually. I'm kind of blown away by it. It's not as big as I thought it would be, but it's still sizable, looks very chunky. Feels really solid as well. Like if you've held Fans Hobby stuff before, you'll know that typically it's pretty good quality. Do you know what I mean? It feels kind of really robust, and this feels, certainly first impressions anyway, very solid. No concerns so far. It is a lot of unpainted red on here, and you know, but the colors do look really nice. I love the blue, nice little gold accents, so we'll have a look at all of that in a minute. And it's worth just noting that the trailer will stand by itself. It's got this little arm section just here, which is actually what plugs it into the back of the cab, but you can fold it around just like I've done underneath there, and it does mean that actually the trailer stands very stably all by itself. I wasn't sure if it would for a moment, but it does. Of course, then you want to go ahead and get the trailer actually onto the cab. So it's these little peg holes just here that correspond with the back of the cab. So you just got to get them lined up. And then lo and behold, that's the form that a lot of people will be really familiar with. And wow, it looks excellent. Really love the design that they've gone with. It is a bit of a stylized take, like it's not, you know, none of Fans Hobby stuff is like so slavish to the source material, whatever that is, whether it's Armada Generation 1. You know, they don't typically do stuff that is like a dead ringer for what it used to look like, you know, but it's always got that kind of stylistic flair to it. But I really like that. It's kind of something that you need to buy into a little bit. But if you do, I think there's a lot of merit to it as well. And certainly this thing, what can I say? It slaps. Anyway, let's go ahead and get him weaponed up. So first thing you want to do is pop these little missiles just in the front little launchers just here. They just kind of click into place very, very nicely. Now, this is another thing that I typically find with Fans Hobby stuff, is that there's a kind of, well, really with a lot of their more recent releases especially, like a real sense of play value. You know, they often have stuff that just kind of works really nicely, and they really kind of think about the gimmicks and all of that kind of good stuff, which is actually something that, let's be fair, not every third-party company is good at, but they certainly do it really well. Now next we're going to want to put this big gun on top of the vehicle mode. As I say, you can store it underneath with a bit of weapon storage if you prefer, but I'm definitely going to want mine on top. So first thing you do is extend it. Oh, that's pretty satisfying. Then it's got these little arm sections just on the side, so you just kind of want to rotate those out to the side like so, and then it will plug in to these little blue bits. There you go. I think actually you just need to rock it back slightly. There we go. Seems to go in quite securely, and actually that's quite nice. It gives it a bit of movement as well, which is unusual. Do you know what I mean? It's quite an interesting design with those little arms. I just thought it would just peg in sort of securely like so, but actually no. So you do get a little bit of wiggle with it, which is kind of cool. And actually you can then put one of these missiles into the end of the gun as well. It's a little bit bizarre because you only get 6 of them. So obviously there were 6 ports, 6 holes on the sort of front missile launchers, and then 1 here. So maybe it would have been nice to have 7 missiles. I've checked around in the box. There are definitely only 6 that I've got, but hey ho. And yeah, there is Naval Commander with his gun and all of his missiles in place, and beautiful thing. Absolutely looks fantastic. I'm quite enamored with it so far. So let's go into a bit of close-up detail on this guy. Now the first thing to kind of mention is this very shiny windshield on here. I mean, again, stylistically speaking, it's a bit of a departure from what some people might be expecting, but I kind of like it. I think it's a cool little design. Really love the way it catches the light. Kind of classic Fans Hobby stuff, that actually. They tend to put these kind of very kind of robotic, detailed sort of little signatures on their bots, and lo and behold, here it is. Now the front section looks on point too. You've got nice little translucent plastic for the headlights just there, and you've got some very nice silver paint on things like the grille. That all looks really crisply applied. The same's also true for areas like this on the side, where you get little touches of gold paint that looks really quite nice actually. Love the colour they've used. Now before anyone asks, yes, the tyres are rubber. They're kind of a very hard rubber, like definitely not the squishiest that I've ever seen, but that's probably not a bad thing because it will make it slightly more durable. And yeah, it does still have that ever so slight bounce to it when it's on a surface or whatever. Now of course here on the side you've got these little smokestacks, but you can actually unpeg them like so. There we go. They come out, and there is an alternate placement for them just on the side. Just go in like that, and that looks kind of cool too. So yeah, it's horses for horses really, isn't it? I mean, I think I definitely prefer them at the back as they originally come, because this just kind of looks a little bit wide on the sides to me, like he's got kind of big ears or something, but you do you. Now just coming up to the trailer section, of course, you've got these missile launchers displayed very prominently at the front. I think they look absolutely brilliant. There is a bit of play value with these as well, because they will actually untab like so, and then they're on these like tiny little arms just underneath, and so actually you can move them around quite a bit. Which is cool. I mean, they can kind of tilt up or down or however you really want them. And there is then the ability to shoot missiles. Oh, I've got to go and find those now. But yeah, so that's a bit of old school fun for you, isn't it? Just don't take your eye out. Just looking at the back of the trailer, this stripe is quite nice along there. I mean, I think there is a little bit of kind of fuzziness just around the sides of the paint, a little bit anyway, but it looks absolutely fine. Now, not many paint applications on this thing, but where you do get them, like with the little gold sections just here, they all look very nice. And in keeping with the cab section, there is rubber on here on the back wheels, and of course there are moving treads as well, which is, hey, that's something. How fun is that? Back section of the trailer looks really cool as well. I mean, there's not really a lot there, and the doors don't open or anything like that, but hey, it does the job. Then of course you've got the gun on top, which looks really nice with a bit of red paint along the side, some gold and silver on top as well, and of course at the back just there. And it does fire the missile as well. It's got this little slider button just here, which is very unusual. And I will say, seems to be a little bit, not temperamental, but you really have to there you go. You really have to push it for all it's worth to get it to activate, but my word, that missile goes across the room. So yeah, all told, this thing presents very nicely indeed. And I think what is cool is that it does feel still like a toy. You know, it's kind of got that play value and kind of fun factor to it. That it's not just kind of a piece that you're going to kind of stick on the shelf and it looks nice, but you know, you never want to touch it. It's definitely not that. It's still got that kind of toyetic quality to it. I mean, obviously it's got missiles that fire and things like that. But you know, Fans Hobby, as I always say about their designs, they still know how to bring the fun factor. But you know, none of that is to say that this thing doesn't look nice as well. And whilst I do think that maybe it could have a little bit more paint, you know, like for me, like bare red plastic always looks a little bit drab. That's just my personal preference. And as it is here, do you know what I mean? It's fine. Like the color is nice, but I just like a little bit of paint. That's just me. But you know, overall, it does present very tidily. It does feel rock solid so far, anyway. And you know, I'm impressed. I'm impressed with it. I really like what they've got going on here. And you know, proportionally speaking, everything else, I think it looks really good as well. I mean, I think, you know, again, it is slightly stylized, but I think they've done a good job with it. It certainly feels like Armada Optimus Prime to me, despite it being, you know, that little bit kind of got a bit of a flair to it. I still think it does a good job at kind of looking like the character model. And it will roll as well. As I mentioned earlier, it's got rubber treads at the back and wheels at the front, but it seems to roll really, really quite nicely. Right, well, let's turn our attention to old Sparkplug here for a second. And again, I think he looks really, really cool. I mean, he's absolutely tiny. He's kind of, you know, we'll do a comparison in a minute, but kind of maybe just a slight touch bigger than a Generation 1 Micromaster. But the yellow looks really nice. Paint applications look good again. And hey, you know, it's going to be a bit of fun, isn't it? Of course, when compared with Optimus, he's really quite tiny indeed, as you would expect. I mean, he's a mini-con after all, but I think they work really nicely together. And it's good to have a little bit of colour in there as well, a bit of yellow going on, kind of breaks it up a bit. Now, of course, the main gimmick with Armada is mini-con ports and the ability to actually load the mini-cons you know, onto the main bots themselves. Now, this guy does have mini-con ports, not too many, but they're actually kind of like these little pegs just here that need folding out, whereas obviously on the original toys, they were just kind of, you know, ever present. So once you do that, you can then just press old spark plug into place and he will hold. Does take a little bit of a press to get him to go, but there you go. That looks about as you would expect it to, I guess. I mean, actually, it doesn't do anything here. So like on the original toys, of course, it was a gimmick to kind of activate some of the hidden play features, you know, whether it was pop out guns or whatever else. Whereas here, he just kind of sits on the peg. But still, it's a fun inclusion, I guess. Now, there are further mini-con ports on top. So if that's where the gun pegs in, just there. So you need to take that out of the way. But then as you can see, you could put another little fold-up peg. So I've already put old spark plug, Fans Hobby spark plug, in place there. And the good news is that obviously there's only one mini-con that comes actually with this release, but you can use your original mini-con. So if you do have some vintage, and yes, they are vintage Armada toys, then you can actually peg them in just there as well. And lo and behold, there are a couple on the back of the kind of cab section as well, and obviously the one on the side, you've got one on the other side. And there you go. I'm going to do you a challenge actually, because obviously there's going to be a few original mini-cons featured in this, and some Generation 1 Micromasters in a minute as well, just for size comparisons. And I'm not going to name them all because, well, A, there's going to be a lot and it's going to take a while, but B, I honestly don't think I can remember all their names. But I'm going to do you a little challenge. If you do know them, see if you can name them all in the comments below of this video, right? And, you know, you can win credibility. How's that for you? You can win a bit of credibility for the day if you can name all the mini-cons in this video. Now, in terms of size comparisons then, here you go. You've got them side by side with those very same mini-cons, and I do think he stacks up pretty nicely actually. You could honestly fool yourself into thinking that that it was, you know, one of the original toys. It's the same sort of size and it kind of really fits in with the aesthetic. And there's a few more for you, and again, yeah, size-wise, design-wise, everything, I think he slots in very nicely. And I do think that actually the functionality of being able to use old mini-cons on this new toy is pretty cool indeed. It's another sign of Fans Hobby really kind of understanding the audience, I think. And then here he is with the original spark plug. Well, I say that actually, this is the Manga Convoy DX set, the Japanese one, but or just, you know, Powerlink spark plug, if that's what you prefer, because he's gold instead of yellow. But there you go, you can see, again, stylistically quite different, but I think it's interesting to see the two of them together. Very similar size-wise, even though they do look quite different. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get this guy transformed, and it's quite simple in theory, but quite fiddly in practice, I've just found out. Now, a large part of that seems to be because, you know, bits just kind of pop off very randomly, and you've got these arms and legs in here, and honestly, I haven't managed to do it yet. Done it a couple of times already, but I haven't managed to do it without bits popping off. So first thing, you just want to kind of fan the arms out slightly like so. Now next you've got to get this back section out, which is a real challenge to do given the size of this thing without the arms popping off from the sides. There we go. And just kind of fold it around the front. Now we're going to take his feet, which are around the sides of his head, and there's not much clearance here at all actually for this bit. So this is where I might lose a limb. There you go, just kind of fold those down. And I can't tell you actually how kind of ginger I'm being with this thing to just kind of not have bits randomly fall off as I do it. So as I say, it's actually, if I do it, if I do manage it, it'll be the first time without bits falling off. Rotate the head around like so, and the waist as well. It does actually have a bit of waist swivel going on, which is cool. Now this is the really fiddly bit, because then you want to rotate the shoulders up, and there really isn't kind of a decent way to do this. But there you go. You just kind of want to peg them in like so. So we've done the one. Can we do the other? There we go. It's very, very fiddly indeed. Now just fold that section up onto his back. Then on his arms, he's got these little pins on the side, which have actually got they've actually got a bit of blue kind of residue of paint on them, which is a little bit unfortunate, but it doesn't look too bad. And there you go. You just kind of slide them in like so. Let's get the other one. And that's your lot. And well, yeah, it really is a very intricate little process. Dare I say, it's too fiddly. Like, it doesn't need to be as complicated as that. And I think they've really tried to kind of dial up the articulation on this lad, which is cool. I really like that. But in the process, just kind of made it a little bit of a faff. I mean, he does look nice enough. He's a little bit kind of gangly, if anything, but for such a small little thing, he's certainly quite intricate. And there, I mean, you can see a little bit of a backpack going on, but honestly, at this size, it's really not too bad at all, is it? It's kind of spindly on the limbs, but I do like him, but yeah, very fiddly little transformation. Now the paint's pretty good actually for such a little thing, and the face is, you know, very nicely defined. You can make it out, you can even see his eyes and things like that. The windshield looks good. You do have that little bit of paint rub or something on that shoulder joint, on the elbow joint rather, but you know, overall I think he looks very tidy. Now we'll say that actually his articulation's a bit of an odd one as well, because those little kind of pegs that you know, that work for the elbows, they actually kind of impede slightly on the kind of windshield section, so it kind of means that his arms kind of have to fold out and round like that, which is a little bit kind of unfortunate. I could really do with a bit of ankle tilt or something on this guy, but even then you can't really, there you go, you can't really fan the legs out at any kind of meaningful you know, angle, because the joints will just pop off, and as much as you can just kind of keep reapplying them, it's a little bit frustrating. So I don't know, the articulation is kind of there, but it's just, it's fiddly. It's just an awkward little thing, really. Still, he does look pretty cool. I mean, I do like the aesthetic of him. I just think that, I don't know, sometimes with these little guys, they just don't need to be as intricate and articulated as third-party companies seem to want to make them. Do you know what I mean? And even some of the kind of more recent, you know, official Micromasters, my personal opinion, I just kind of prefer the more simplistic original versions sometimes. So it is with the Minicons here as well. Do you know what I mean? There's a kind of innate kind of charm that just means you don't need tons of articulation and whatever else. That's just my opinion anyway, but there you go. That said, you know, the original Sparkplug is a little bit of a weird thing himself, isn't he? But there you go, you can see the two of them in comparison with each other just there. And yeah, you know, I do like what Fans Hobby have strived for here a little bit. I don't know if the execution's quite there for me on this little guy. And then lo and behold, here's Sparkplug with a few Generation 1 Micromasters, as promised. And you can see that actually he's quite a bit more sizable than them in robot mode. I think actually in vehicle mode, you know, a little bit more comparable, but he kind of stretches, if anything, and kind of enlarges a little bit. So there you go. Now, before we move on, the other thing that you can use these Minicon ports for, if you fold the pegs back in, is to put those blue boxes on. And I hadn't really clocked what they were for before, but they're actually kind of the sides of his vehicle mode that kind of jut out like that. Now, the other thing that's quite interesting about these is that they actually have these little kind of doors that open up like that, and it means that you can put your Minicon inside. Get in there, you. And I think, yeah, on the sides of the vehicle mode, they look really quite cool and kind of fill out his, you know, fill out the look a little bit. I don't know why I hadn't really clocked that that's what they were for before at the start, but it does work wonders. It looks really, really nice and kind of gives it that classic look. And I think the fact that you can store the Minicons in there, that's cool. And of course, let's do some comparisons with Optimus himself. And here is Naval Commander on the left, in case you're not sure, with Fans Hobby's own Power Baser, their original Power Baser. And this is, of course, a take on Generation 1 Power Master Optimus Prime, and it's a big old thing, as you can see here, because actually it's a little bit longer than Naval Commander, if anything, just a little bit longer. But you know, Naval Commander still looks pretty big, it's fair to say. Yeah, I mean, lengthwise, there's not a whole lot in it. I mean, both of the trailer sections are, you know, set to the same point at the back, so you can just see that little gap just here at the front. So he's not quite as long, but still it's not too far off, and not as tall either in terms of cab mode, but still quite imposing all by himself. And then here he is with a couple of Masterpiece cars, and I figured that would be interesting to see, as technically he is kind of Masterpiece scale, I guess. I mean, there isn't really a Masterpiece scale for the Unicron Trilogy stuff so far, because there aren't really many of them, but there you go, that's how he looks with the cars. Needless to say, got tracks and Make Toys Downbeat just there. And I think that looks pretty good, actually, for a bit of cross-generational stuff. And you can see what I mean with that if you do a comparison with something like Masterpiece RC, which I just, you know, happen to have lying around, having only reviewed her recently. And yeah, he's a big old thing, but not so huge, you know? Now, in terms of another interesting size comparison, here he is with another Masterpiece toy. It's MB-15 Convoy, or Optimus Prime if you prefer, so the G1 version. And again, that toy is a little bit longer than Naval Commander, with the trailer and everything you know, kind of all in. But it's really interesting to see them as well. Stylistically, obviously very, very different. But hey, bit of fun in it. If you collect Masterpiece style Optimus Primes, there you go. But do you know what I want to see? Some Unicron Trilogy comparisons, baby. And here he is with, this is actually Micron Legend Megatron, the Japanese version. But, you know, mostly the same as the Hasbro version, just some paint application differences, mostly in robot mode. But there you go, you can see, I think actually they look really, really very cool together. I kind of like how that works. Of course, Fans Hobby have a Megatron on the way as well, so we'll have to drool over that another day, I guess. And then here are a couple of the Autobots. You've got Blur, Hotshot, and Red Alert. And these are, again, all the Japanese versions, Micron Legend versions, but there you go. And it's actually Powerlink's Hotshot, isn't it? But anyway, they look cool together. I actually think you could almost make this work in a display, because, you know, they're sizable old things, the Unicron Trilogy toys, particularly the Armada ones, you know, so they really kind of, I don't know, they just work. Then here we have him with the original Overload toy, again the Japanese version, but yeah, it's interesting to see, because I would not be at all surprised if Fans Hobby did this guy as well, right? Because of course, I mean, if you're not familiar, there should be a lot of interactivity if indeed they do make this design, because you know, on the original toy, this guy can be pulled almost like a sort of second trailer, and then he can combine with the kind of big man robot mode as well. So it would be a lot of fun if Fans Hobby did that one day. And then here he is with the smaller original Optimus Prime toy in its cab mode. This one obviously came with no trailer. This is what people commonly refer to as Bendy Prime, which has always amused me, because it is articulated, but it's not like super articulated or anything, but still a nice toy. It's what a lot of people consider to be kind of their favorite interpretation of that cab mode anyway, from the original line. And yeah, I think, you know, stylistically you can see that it's really kind of on point, the new Naval Commander, isn't it? It looks good. But I'm sure this is the comparison we're all wanting to see, isn't it? Because this is the original Armada Optimus Prime toy. Well, kind of, anyway, as again, this is the Manga Convoy DX version, which is essentially just the Japanese Powerlinks version. And yeah, it's a beautiful toy, absolutely beautiful. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if indeed Fans Hobby looked to re-release Naval Commander in this deco as well, because I mean, well, they'd be silly not to, really, wouldn't they? I'm absolutely convinced it will happen. And sadly, I don't have the original colours version of the original toy to show you. But there you go. You get a good idea of the design, at least. And it's interesting to see that size-wise, it's actually not that much bigger. It's basically the same size as the original, if anything. It just, you know, a little bit taller, a little bit bulkier. But overall, I think they look beautiful together, and it's a very, very worthy update of the original. Now, of course, we will do transformation to robot mode in just a moment, but before that, there's a thing that the instructions call extended truck mode. So let's check that out. So firstly, you just want to lose the gun. So then you actually want to unclip the back of the trailer and fold it over like so. Then you want to unclip these side panels just there. That folds out. And then you want to unclip it here as well, a little bit stiff. And then that rotates up and over like so, and then you do the other side as well. Then just connect those together in the middle, and then these side panels have little bits that kind of fold down, little panels that fold down and out like so. Kind of reminds me of like when you have to extend a table at home, right, for like Sunday dinner. And that's your lot. And yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. I I don't know that it really gives you much, to be honest. I mean, it's essentially just those panels folded out, as I say, like a little table. The instructions do show you having these panels, you know, these boxes, sorry, from the sides of his robot mode kind of positioned there, but they don't kind of clip in or anything, so I guess you can pretty much just do whatever you want with them. And then I think it's just supposed to be like a little kind of, I don't know, like a halfway base almost for the Minicons to kind of play on. The only reason it doesn't really kind of work is that these sections actually don't sit parallel to the floor. They kind of angle down slightly just because these bits here are not kind of long enough to make them just sort of, you know, stand up properly. So yeah, it's a little bit fan modey for my taste. But hey, you know, you can have some fun with it if you want. I don't know, maybe it's one of those that makes a little bit more sense the more Minicons you throw at it, right? Like it kind of works a bit more if you just shove a few more of those little guys in there somehow. Anyway, the time has come, so we're going to check out transformation to the small robot mode and the base mode. First of all, okay, first transformation done. We've got him into his smaller robot mode and the base mode, and you know what? I don't think that was too bad, actually. There was nothing really too perplexing along the way. Everything is relatively straightforward. Obviously, it's a bit of a novelty transforming this guy into base mode, because on the original toy, it's all automated. It's the big gimmick of that toy was that the base mode, the trailer could kind of transform by itself. A little bit temperamental though it was, but it did do it. Whereas here, actually, you've got to do it all by hand, as you've no doubt seen. But yeah, it's a fun thing to do, I think. Now, whilst I'm recording this, I have actually just seen that Fans Hobby themselves have actually just tweeted, and I think on their Facebook page as well, put out a thing saying that a couple of people that have already got this in hand have reported a couple of issues with some slightly brittle plastic in certain places. I haven't had any issues so far. Certainly there are a couple of bits where, I wouldn't say, oh, be careful or anything like that, but it maybe doesn't feel quite as solid as something like their power baser. Do you know what I mean? I think that there are maybe a couple of bits of plastic where, particularly the bits where they've obviously identified things where, you know, I would just watch out. I mean, that's stuff like in the robot mode chest, those little tiny little kind of almost like beaded sections that kind of pop out, and it's a really, really strange mechanism. Quite cool in its way, I mean, but certainly a bit unexpected and a bit kind of, oh, okay, what's this about? So I don't know, just I guess it's one to watch out for, and obviously if you do have any issues, they've said please contact them and they'll sort it out. So that's something. Now we'll talk about the base mode in just a minute, but let's turn our attention to this guy first of all, who of course is the little inner robot mode, and he's quite a handsome little thing, all told. I mean, he's very, very simple compared to what I thought he might be. Very reminiscent of the original, particularly the original Bendy Prime, actually, the smaller toy. Kind of really reminds me of that design quite a lot. I mean, very simple in terms of how it transforms. It's really all in the upper body, the bits of transformation that are there, because the legs, literally you just turn the feet and split the legs apart, and that's basically it. So, but he does clean up quite nicely, and I mean, although he is very reminiscent of the original toy, you know, it's still a slightly stylized and kind of modern uptake on the original. Fairly clean as well, as you might expect. but again, it really does kind of remind me of that original toy in a lot of ways. Now that's kind of true of the face sculpt as well, which I do think again looks a bit more like Bendy Prime than the actual, the full-size mold. And it's not bad. It's not a bad face sculpt. I mean, I'm kind of not in love with it at the same time. Like, it's okay. It's maybe a little bit smooth for my liking. I kind of like Optimus head sculpts when they're maybe a bit more kind of angular, as indeed actually the larger size toy, the original was. But still, this one looks decent enough. Now the chest is of course the very front of the cab, and it kind of folds up with those little beaded parts, which is really, really very strange. And if you unclip it here, you do actually have a little matrix accessory inside there, which looks really, really very nice indeed. It's got a little kind of crystal piece in there, which sparkles beautifully. Like, I've got to say, I've seen a fair few matrices in my time, but actually that middle kind of crystal part is really one of the nicest. Now it will unclip as well. It does come out of the chest, which is cool. It's a bit of a faff to get out, but yeah, there you go. Looks really quite nice. Did take me a minute to work out how to close up this chest section, but just to be really clear, because I think you want to be careful with those, you want to kind of poke them down a little bit like that and then fold it up so that bit, this longer bit, sits downward, and then the chain moves up, if that sort of makes sense. And then this little clip here goes underneath this section, and then in like so, and lo and behold. Arms are cool, and I really like the way that this piece folds over from the top during transformation to kind of reveal the arm joint. It's a really nice little piece of transformation. Doesn't work if you've got these blasters in the alternate configuration for truck mode. You need to actually have them in the kind of default configuration straight out of the box. But yeah, still a nice little smooth piece of transformation. And the arms generally look really, really nicely done. Got to say, the hands are a little bit strange. This little mismatched colour just there. Obviously they've kept the paint off the fingers, to avoid rubbing, but it just ends up looking a bit weird. It's kind of like he's wearing strange fingerless gloves. Not majorly in love with this piece, which of course is the kind of top of the bonnet of the cab section, and it does fold back like so during transformation, but then it just kind of sits there, it doesn't really kind of have like a defined place as such, and so it ends up feeling like a bit cumbersome. It's not so bad, but I'm not in love with it. Now this middle section's a bit weird because I mean, quite clearly there's a bit of a visual break just in the abdomen there. And that's presumably for how it splits apart for the arms for combined mode, and of course there is actually a split just here as well. I think it's the fact that visually you can see that gap in the abdomen that kind of just belies it slightly, and this piece is forever wanting to untab. Like, I have kind of pushed it back together a couple of times, but there always seems to be just a little bit of a seam there, so I can't get it sitting completely flush. Coming around to the back on his bum, and you've got these little kind of skirt pieces, if anything, which are made up of the kind of bed section of the cab. I don't mind it personally. I feel like some people are going to grumble about this a little bit because it looks a bit kibbly or whatever, but actually I don't mind it so much because they do articulate out the way kind of however you want them, so they won't impede posability or anything like that. And actually it's fairly reminiscent of the original design. Both the Bendy Prime and the sort of larger one, they both had something similar to this that actually didn't really articulate in any kind of way, or not as much anyway, and this actually feels okay to me. And then here's his legs, and that's a rocking pair of legs, isn't it? Pretty kind of good and chunky, and they just look really nice. The only thing that did strike me as a bit odd actually is the colour of the feet, because although they are grey, it's a much lighter grey than I kind of imagined that it would be, so they end up looking a bit white, if anything, just in comparison with everything else. It kind of looks like he's wearing a pair of trainers or something, but hey, it works. Now articulation wise, there's a lot at the head, can kind of move around very freely. It's on a ball joint, so anything you want just there. Shoulders will move up to not quite to 90 degrees, but actually a decent amount. There is bicep swivel at the just above the elbows as well, so that's pretty good. And there are some very kind of clicky but soft little ratchets. They're nice actually, they feel good quality there, so that's good. There is a wrist swivel, and all of the fingers are on one piece, so they articulate together, those non-painted fingers, no articulation in the thumb. Coming down to the lower half, and this is where things get interesting. Now I've just kind of cleared the skirt and everything out the way, just to show you this as best as I can. Now there is a waist swivel, but you'll notice if you just try and go for it, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. But then there's these little pieces just on the sides, which, I mean, this is bizarre, I've never seen this before, but you want to pull these out like so to kind of access, like that, the waist swivel, and then it will turn. Not so much actually, like, can we get it to go a bit further. God, it's all popping apart now. There you go. You can get it to turn a little bit anyway. I think it's just because of the way that this thing obviously splits in two. So very, very strange mechanism. But yeah, I mean, I guess you can leave those popped out to the sides if you want, just to get a bit of waist swivel going on. It is there. I find, again, I'm having issues with this part kind of not solidly locking together, which is a little bit frustrating. And then with the legs, you've got, again, kind of soft clicky ratchets at the hips, just like that. And that piece is gone again. You can see it's just split apart. Very frustrating. And then at the knee, again, nice soft clicky ratchets. There is a bit of a turn as well, just above the knee, so that's really appreciated. And then you do get a decent amount of ankle tilt backwards and forwards, and a bit of toe and foot articulation as well. So quite a bit all told. Of course then, in order to get him properly posed up, you want to put his gun in his hand, and it's that, like if you're not familiar with it, it's like a little slider mechanism that just goes into the kind of port in the hand, and that just goes in like so. Just get it lined up and slide it in like that. And when it is in, that feels very secure indeed. It's a big old gun for a relatively small hand, but it feels secure. One small thing to note, it's a tiny little grumble, but the fingers don't really close like anything more than that, so they are kind of stuck open. They don't look very natural around the handle of the gun. That is a complaint I've made about a couple of Fans Hobbies products before, mostly in the early days actually, but this is probably the most kind of obvious example, actually. Has to be said, though, when you get him all posed up and, in a really decent pose, he looks magnificent. I'm really, really into it. Feels super solid. The joints all feel very, very tight. I still got a bit of a grumble about that kind of crotch piece splitting apart far too easily, but overall, I like how he poses quite a bit. And interestingly, you can see here actually that I have managed to get a lot more waist swivel out of this thing than initially I thought there was. And I think, actually that mechanism is it's very clever, do you know what I mean? Because it will allow the whole thing to split into two for the combined mode, but still it gives you a bit of waist swivel for this mode as well. So, it's really kind of something to appreciate. I'm sure it was a bit of a challenge for them. But yeah, I think he poses really, really very nicely. It's not like the most fluid, like there are obviously, Transformers like Masterpiece RC, for example, that go way beyond what this can do, if indeed that's kind of what you're used to. But still, he poses very, very nicely, and as I say, quite sturdy overall. Now, in terms of comparisons here, we have him with Fans Hobbies Power Baser again in its smaller robot form, and Transform Element Op Leader, a review of which is also on the channel. And he's standing in for a Generation 1 Optimus Prime, and but he is the same height as MP-10 and MP-44, in case you're wondering. And it's interesting to see that obviously Naval Commander in this robot form comes in quite a bit smaller, if anything. And a lot of people have mentioned that online already with the kind of preview pics that Fans Hobby have released, and sort of said, oh, I wish he was bigger and whatever else. And it is a weird one, because obviously this has kind of become almost like the sort of accepted universal height, if you will, for Optimus designs in this sort of style. But actually I don't mind him being a little bit smaller, do you know what I mean? He's not the largest robot form in the Unicron Trilogy, and certainly not in Armada. He is surpassed by a number of other robot designs in that cartoon, and certainly in the toy line. So if anything, it kind of works in that regard. And I think if Fans Hobby are going to make more of these guys, well, God, you want some room on the shelf, right? Here he is with what is currently the only other Masterpiece-style toy based on a character from the Unicron Trilogy. At least that's my take anyway. Obviously, some toys, it's a bit open to interpretation what is and isn't considered Masterpiece-style. So feel free to at me if indeed you disagree with that statement, but there you go. Anyway, it's MiGTOY's Galaxy Meteor, based off Cybertron, Starscream, and there you go. Nice to see them together. Hopefully more soon. Here he is with Energon Optimus Prime, of course combined with Wing Saber in one of his two configurations, if you're not familiar. And man, my mind is absolutely buzzing with all the potential combinations and toys and everything that Fans Hobby could potentially do. Imagine if they do a Wing Saber. I mean, they've already teased the Energon Optimus. The sky's the limit, really, in terms of what they might do. It's very exciting. Here he is with those Armada Autobots again. I mean, here you've got Red Alert, Blur, and Hotshot in his Power Links form. And again, it's funny to see how actually he, although he's, a modern update and whatever else, he actually doesn't look, too out of place. It's very, very funny. So, but again, fingers crossed that we get some new versions of some of these guys as well. It'll be fun to see. Here he is with Overload again, and also with Armada Jetfire. Again, it's the Japanese version, but there you go. And it's really interesting to see, because actually he's, not too far off being this sort of rough same size as these guys. Just a little smidge taller than Overload. and actually just roughly the same height as old Jetfire there as well, maybe just like a smidge smaller at head height. But yeah, really interesting to see. And again, you know, fun to speculate if Fans Hobby would bring us both of these characters, because they both combine with the combined mode, you know, like more combinations. Gosh, my mind is, as I say, my mind is racing with it. And then here he is versus the original Armada Megatron, and yeah, I'm really excited for that version as well. It'll be interesting to see exactly what they do with it, particularly as I love this original toy, love the colour scheme, hoping they give us a Galvatron version as well, or, you know, Megatron S version, and yeah, it'd be very interesting to see how that pans out. And here you go, here he is with both of the original versions of Optimus from the Armada line. You've got the Bendy Prime on the left, the smaller one. As I say, really is quite tiny, quite tiny. Surprised me when I first saw it, I remember. And then you've got the, as I say, this is the Manga Convoy DX version, but it's the same design as the original Armada toy. So there you go. And yeah, he's bigger than both of them, but stylistically he does remind me of the Bendy Prime version a lot more, as I've already mentioned. But yeah, there you go. Nice update. Nice update. Now, before we move on, we do of course need to talk about this base mode. And it's, do you know what? I'm almost a bit embarrassed to admit this, but I'm never all that fussed about base modes. I don't know why, like maybe I need to turn in my fandom card or something, but I don't know, is it just me? Like I'm always kind of like, okay, yeah, no, it's a base mode, but never get that excited about them, ultimately. I would say the same of like Earthrise, Scorponok even, and stuff like that. Like they're fine, but I don't know, maybe it's just me. Anyway, what I will say is that kind of some of my problems with this, you know, things like the legs being quite obvious, is stuff that is very inherent to the original design. So, you know, those sorts of little kind of quibbles that I might have, I'm not going to judge it too harshly, just because, you know, they're taking what is a pre-existing design and just updating it, essentially. So, you know, stuff like, yes, those are obviously legs, and, you know, you get that kind of stuff with a lot of Transformers base modes. Hey, I'm not going to quibble that too much. And, you know, to be fair to it, aside from the legs, it actually does quite well. I really like the way that this kind of ramp section folds up. Again, it does remind me a little bit of kind of unpacking furniture. You know, I said about the unfolding the table earlier, but it does have that kind of vibe to it. Like, I don't know, almost like setting up for like some really elaborate picnic or something. But still, it does kind of work, you know, and there's some very cool little features, you know, like these little kind of missile launchers on those arms. These little guns just there, you know, very cool. Some ramps and little platforms and things, so there's definitely a lot of play value to be had with this thing. Of course, you've got a little ramp here at the back, so old spark plug can go up and in like so. Got these little ramps on the side as well, so you can do the same thing there. Now, these missile launchers are on little folding arms, which is kind of cool, so they're very articulated. Maybe just be slightly careful with those. I mean, they feel very stiff, but I wouldn't bend them too much from the top. You kind of want to bend them from just there. But they've got a lot of you know, ways to pose them, and then of course you can also fire the missiles as well, should you wish. Now, of course, you've got that main gun on top just here, just remember to extend it. And now you can actually stand Optimus kind of in the main bed of the base mode, and then you know, position him to hold that like a little kind of turret gun. That's quite cool, I'm into that. You've got these two little guns here which pop up from well, from his robot mode knees, of course, and it does feel very reminiscent of similar guns on the original toy, so that's kind of cool. There's quite a lot of swiveling and things that can be done with those as well. And then there is some play value to be had with these little boxes again, which I just took them off the sides of his legs where I had them, and you can just peg them in on the side ramps like so. So again, although, you know, you can use those as normal ramps if you wish, you can actually have the little minicons go straight up and in, and close that up. And then they will also peg onto the side of this kind of platform section just there, so for reasons, but you know, I mean, it looks cool, why not? And then if you really want, of course, there are some minicon ports round and about the place. Not too many actually that I've discovered so far. The main ones seem to be on the side of these rather large legs, but there you go, there are some. Now, one bit that I do find slightly annoying is this section just in here, these little these ramps, the way they kind of meet up in the middle, because it has a bit of a habit of coming unpegged. It will go, initially I was going to say that I couldn't get it to sit securely at all, and actually I have, with a bit of jimmying, kind of managed it now. But yeah, they do come unpegged a bit. And you know, again, I think this thing really comes into its own when you've loaded it with minicons and micromasters and whatever else floats your boat. Like, you know, go nuts with it. And yeah, it is a bit of fun. You know, despite my slight predilection against base modes, I'll concede that this one is fun. And again, here you can see a very quick comparison between the two, you know, with the original Manga Convoy DX version on the right. That's why the colors are different. But, you know, it does do a really kind of good job. I really like the platform section in the middle. I think that's particularly cool and kind of a nice, you know, sort of update. It's its own thing. It's not, you know, slavish in any way, but it hits the kind of right beats in many regards. Of course, it doesn't convert all by itself, as I've already mentioned. I've already had one person say to me, does it convert by itself? And sort of sound a little bit like disappointed, like, oh, when they hear that it doesn't. But sadly, no. But I'm actually okay with that. I really would not want it to change in the way that the original toy does, you know, automatically. Because although that's a fun gimmick, it's been done, and actually it's quite nice to have a modern, you know, a modern thing with its own engineering, its own kind of, you know, its own strengths. But, you know, talking of transformation, it's the time we've all been waiting for. Let's get this guy into the combine mode. Okay, that's second transformation done, and that was quite a bit of fun actually. I quite enjoyed that. Nothing too arduous, nothing too strenuous. I say that actually, I really don't like the way these little clips on the shoulders kind of go in. That did upset me a little bit. Just because I don't know, it was just arduous. You just got to kind of get your thumbnail or a nail in there and like really in there, and then kind of slide this bit in. It's pretty fiddly. It's pretty difficult. Other than that, though, most of it was pretty straightforward, pretty easy. Nothing too taxing on the whole, and it all kind of clips together really nicely, tabs together very solidly, and more so than the base mode, actually way more than the base mode, and it looks good and it feels good. I mean, that's a handsome old hunk of robot, no? It's certainly a thing. I really like it. It looks really cohesive. It doesn't at all look, actually, from here now, like two halves, do you know what I mean? Which actually the original toy was very guilty of. It often did look like, you know, the cab section just kind of plugged into the trousers, which, you know, ultimately is what it was. But this does not look like that. I think it's because he's actually got kind of proper legs this time. Don't get me wrong, I love that original toy. So if you're listening to this like, how dare he insult my beloved Armada Optimus Prime, I love it. Don't get me wrong, but you know what I'm talking about, I'm sure. And anyway, yeah, this guy, I don't know, he looks fantastic. Certainly, the look is Very, very strong indeed. I mean, that face sculpt is strong. Very, very strong. Now, some people really don't like Armada Optimus's head sculpt, and yeah, it took me a little while to get used to it. I mean, if anything, this recreates it very, very closely, I think, and very, very nicely. It's about as handsome as it gets. But I do really like it, and I think Fans Hobby have done a brilliant job with it. It's kind of almost got like a nautical theme to it, or is that just me? Is that just because he's Naval Commander? I don't know. I'm just waffling now. But you've got these lovely little red eyes in there as well. Really, really nice. Slightly shiny, which is cool. And actually they do light up. There is a little switch just on top of the head. Sadly, no batteries for that currently, so I can't show that to you, but they do light up. One thing I am pleased to see is that actually, although the eyes are not lit at the moment, they still look nice and vibrant. I have a real problem with light up eyes that just look kind of dead. I mean, you do have the translucent ones as well, but I'll definitely be leaving these red eyes on my copy because I just think that looks great, and the gold looks fantastic too. Now, I'm definitely going to be keeping these more pointy ears on my copy. I've just folded them back there, but if indeed you do prefer, then there is this kind of slightly more toyetic original set, which almost look a bit like pipes. Now you will need to unscrew the head in order to install those. I'm actually not going to do it now because I quite like the ones that are on there, to be completely honest. But if indeed you do want to go ahead, then they are there and you can achieve that look. I just definitely prefer these ones. Chest looks really cool just there. You've even got a little space left for an Autobot logo if indeed you want. You know, again, that whole sort of section looks really nice. Got his mega crotch going on here with you know, a couple of hip flaps, which actually don't look too cumbersome. They look really quite nicely placed. That's really good. And a little dab of red paint on there as well. Shoulder pads look good. Of course, you've got a couple of little Minicon ports just up the top there as well, and some nice gold paint just on the front. That all looks on point. Really solid, chunky pair of arms with these wheels on the side, which I really, really like. I like how they've kind of brought that together. Again, you've got hands, which, although they're more articulated this time, have got gold paint on the main bit of the kind of palm and the hand itself, and then unpainted plastic for the fingers and the thumb. And yeah, it does look a little bit weird. It's the old fingerless gloves again, isn't it? Now, coming down a bit, you've got his old knee guns, which actually can sort of shoot forward as well. They can move forward if indeed you want them to, and they look pretty cool. And then a very effective and stable pair of clumpers at the bottom. And actually, he does feel pretty solid all told. I mean, there is a little bit of wobble to him. You know, not gonna lie, there is that little bit of wobble, but I don't feel like he's gonna topple at all. Really, really don't. Now, I have heard a couple of comments about these little side flaps looking, you know, a little bit kibbly or whatever. I think it's actually pretty reminiscent of the original design. I mean, you can see all of those various hinges and everything folded up, but I really, really don't think it looks bad. It looks like a real stylistic choice, if anything. Now, coming round to the back, this is where it gets a little bit kibbly, needless to say, because he does have half the truck, just kind of half the trailer, just kind of hanging off his back. I mean, it is separated out like that, so I think, you know, it's kind of meant to be slightly splayed, as if it's kind of like a skirt almost, you know, like armor or whatever. And in that regard, it does kind of work. Like it does, you know, like with a bit of imagination, you know. And obviously, you've got those guns on the back as well. They can come into play in just a minute. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is, really. It's like, if that bothers you, that's kind of how it is. It doesn't actually feel too bad to me. I honestly don't mind it. And silly me, I've just clocked that actually you're meant to fold in these tread pieces like that as well. So that'll help to clean it up a little bit. There you go. Does that look better? I don't know. It's like it's a little bit cleaner, isn't it? So for me, actually, the biggest offender back here is this piece, which is the hitch for the trailer to connect to the cab in vehicle mode. And it always feels like they don't really know where they wanted it to go, so it just sort of sticks there. But it doesn't really matter. So yeah, all told, I'm really sold on the look of this toy. You know, in this mode, I really, really am. I was kind of like, I liked the smaller robot, and you know, I maybe wasn't in love with it, but this I really think is something spectacular, and no doubt this is the mode that I'll be spending the most time with, do you know what I mean? And the mode that I would display it in as well, because it's really quite breathtaking. Now, in terms of articulation, there's quite a lot going on. Firstly, the head can rotate all the way around, and actually you can just kind of pull it up slightly to give it a little bit more range as well. Can't particularly look up at all or back, but it can look forward a little bit, so that's okay. And then the shoulders, they're on kind of very soft ratchets, but they will go all the way up and over, so that's pretty good. And you get roughly, yeah, actually, if you can bend this little bit up a little bit as well, so you get almost to 90 degrees at the shoulder, just fanned out like that. Then there is a bicep swivel as well, so that's pretty good. And then the elbows will bend not quite to 90, actually pretty limited at the old elbow there, as you can see. And there is a wrist swivel. and the fingers are all independent, and they're all articulated at several points as well, at the knuckle and then actually within the finger itself. And same with the thumb. There is actually a point of articulation in the thumb as well. So quite a lot of posability in the hands. They're the exact same hands as on Powerbaser, if that's the toy that you have, so you may be familiar with it. Now there is a waist swivel, which is really, really good. Actually quite a prominent waist swivel. All of this stuff at the back, all of this kind of skirt or cape or whatever you want to call it, that goes with the top half, interestingly. But it does impede slightly, but actually if you use the ab crunch, which this toy also has, it's less of a problem. Now the ab crunch is weird because it's hard to activate without separating the cab section, but there you go, it just kind of slides like that. It's actually a sort of very hard to do. There you go, the cab's just come out slightly, which is weird because the cab's actually in quite solid. There you go, you have to kind of push it on that piece there, and then it will crunch. Not much, but it's good actually. It gives a little something anyway. Now just moving down to the legs, of course you can move those little hip skirts just out the way if indeed you want. Now the hips are on a ratchet that is very strong indeed. I mean, it will go quite nicely, but that's not going to move. Do you know what I mean? Those legs, those hips are solid. That's going to give you a little bit of a workout. And then the knees are on ratchets as well. Oh, that little piece has just come off, but that's fine. Yeah, all told, that feels very solid indeed. You can get a 90-degree bend at the hips, which is cool. And then there's a very decent amount of foot articulation as well, a little bit of toe action just going on there, and decent ankle tilt both ways, which is really, really nice. And that's all on ratchets as well. And feels really, really good. So absolutely no concerns with the sturdiness of the legs, in my opinion. And it means that despite being such a big old fella and having like so much going on, you know, with the hip skirts and all of that kind of stuff, he actually feels rock solid, like really fun to pose, very articulated and really kind of, you know, like quite nuanced in terms of the articulation going on, but also very solid, very stable. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun posing this guy, taking pictures of him, whatever else. I think this is the mode for me. This is like the vehicle mode is really, really nice. Love it. The smaller robot mode, absolutely fine. You know, but maybe not so spectacular. This mode is the one that I'm like, okay, here we go. This is the business. I mean, for me, you know, just to have an Armada Prime that looks like this, that can pose like this, that feels as solid as this, that's a really big win. Do you know what I mean? It's a really solid, chunky mode. I love it, love it. Now, in terms of play value, of course, he's still covered in Minicon ports, or got a couple at least, so you can go ahead and put some Minicons on him to kind of complete the look, accessorize. And then actually these little boxes that are on the sides of his legs, the little Minicon prisons or whatever, the front of them kind of fold open to reveal some more missiles, but actually they're not real. They're just kind of molded, but interestingly they do look exactly like the missiles that obviously you can put inside his guns and things like that. So that's a nice touch, but yeah, just molded in there, but they look really, really cool. Now, in fact, you can actually use these pegs on the shoulders to put them up there as well, should you absolutely prefer. I mean, that is certainly serving up a look, isn't it? Now, you can actually then bring these guns to the front as well. So just go ahead and move those treads back up to the sides like so, and then you kind of want to rotate these sections all the way back and up, and then you just take this arm section around the front again and rotate it into position. And yeah, there you go, all guns are blazing, even the little ones on his knees. And what can I say? I think he looks pretty terrific. I mean, it's a bit of a departure from you know, his original design, but I think it looks pretty terrific. I think it's a nice kind of weaponized form of his combined mode. Very cool. Now, in terms of comparisons, what could be better than Fans Hobby's own Powerbaser, which is just here? I've got the Marvel Comics head on him and the solid red hands. As you can see, they did a little kind of Marvel Comics sort of upgrade kit or expansion kit, whatever you want to call it, for him, and some while back, and yeah, it looks really cool. If you're a Marvel Comics fan like me, you might like that kind of thing. And yeah, here you can see that he's almost the same size Naval Commander as Powerbaser. In fact, I think Powerbaser just takes it and actually kind of feels maybe a little bit more bulky overall. But, you know, realistically, they're roughly the same size. And they do have kind of a lot in comparison, I think, in terms of the design, how it comes together, whatever else. I would say that actually Naval Commander, though, does feel more finessed. Like, there's a lot that you can see that they've learned on their journey. Like, if you've been following Fans Hobby since the beginning, like I have, then you can kind of see that they have made some learnings as they've gone. And certainly that's evident between these two products just there. But what a great bit of fun to see these two together. It's Just awesome, really. And then, of course, here you've got Transform Element Op Leader again, just there. Same height as Masterpiece MB-44 and MB-15 Convoy, the official toys. So you can kind of get a sense of the sheer scale of Naval Commander, because he is big. He's a big old thing, honestly, way bigger than MP10, MP44, any of those guys in this mode. Here you can see him with Make Toys Galaxy Meteor, their stab at Cybertron, Starscream of course. I don't have the original massive toy, that would be something to see, wouldn't it? I don't know if I think that would be bigger than the Naval Commander by quite a bit. But there you go, good to see anyway. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, it's really fun to think that we're going to get more Unicron Trilogy toys in this sort of style, you know, from different third-party companies. These are just the first two, but you know, many more on the way. And of course here we've got all those original Armada lads again, and he absolutely dwarfs them, doesn't he? It's quite incredible at this point. And of course I've just snuck in old Bendy Prime there, just on the side, and you can see, I mean, he's a tiny little thing anyway, particularly for an Optimus Prime toy, and yeah, absolutely tiny next to Naval Commander. Again, here he is with old Armada Megatron, the original, and yeah, again you can see he's quite a lot smaller. The Fans Hobby version will be much bigger, the Megatron. Won't be quite the size, obviously the same size as the combined mode for Naval Commander. It'll be, you know, a bit smaller, but I think, you know, that should still look pretty good when they're next to each other. And then of course here's the comparison that we've all been waiting for. This is with the original Armada Prime, but again this is the Parallax version, the Japanese one, and you know, so different colours. But again, you know, I'd love to see Fans Hobby do a repaint of their Naval Commander in this colour scheme, because I actually do prefer this colour scheme, to be honest. Like, I like the old red and blue and gold, obviously, but there's just something about this one that's so unique and so sort of like its own thing. So it would be really cool if Fans Hobby did that, which I'm sure they will. They're pretty good with the old repaints. But yeah, it's really interesting to see. This guy is definitely, you know, a very kind of fleshed out, you know, take on that original design, given how hollow it is at the back here, and you know, all the compromises it needs to make to kind of have the auto transform for the trousers. And I do love this original toy. Like, it's got a huge amount of charm to it and whatever else, but it's really great to see such a good job being done of that combined mode in modern style. You know, it just very nice, and I suspect it's going to make a lot of people happy in this mode. Where are we at with this guy then? Well, in conclusion, I'm a big fan overall. I think it's not perfect, you know, there are some compromises along the way, and actually I think most of that is related to the smaller robot mode, which is, you know, it's decent. It's not bad, it's not amazing, you know, there are definitely some compromises in that smaller robot mode. I think the vehicle mode is excellent. I think that's exactly what it needs to be, and it does it really nicely. And the base mode is pretty good as well, do you know what I mean? It's as far as base modes go, it's you know, it's a decent stab at it, definitely, and it's got some really fun you know, kind of play factor in there as well. So, but for me, the main show here is that combined mode, that robot mode, but just because it's so glorious. Like, it does absolutely everything that it needs to do really well, and I'm impressed with it. So, you know, I guess it kind of depends what it is that you're really looking for here. If it's the smaller robot that you're like most hung up on, and that's the bit that you really want, will you be disappointed? I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the bit that that kind of doesn't work quite as well for me. But on balance, as a whole package, I think this is really something. Do you know what I mean? So, and you know, obviously, let's see what Fans Hobby say about some of the reported issues that a couple of people are having. But I haven't had any problems with mine today. No breakages, no concerns even that anything was going to break. So maybe I'm lucky, I don't know, because clearly, you know, a couple of other people have had issues. But, you know, it's just something to think about. There you go. Anyway, for me, for today, there's no doubt in my mind that this thing is a toot. Now, as already mentioned, this guy is available on tfsource.com now, so I'll put a link to their site in the video description so you can go ahead and check that out if indeed he takes your fancy. Otherwise, if you could do me a favour and drop me a like, please, if you enjoyed today's video, that would majorly help me out. The more likes I get, the more people see the vid. That's how it works. I mean, even if you didn't enjoy it, just drop me a like anyway. Why not? Just be nice. Just be nice. Anyway, that's it from me. So enjoy the rest of your day, and TTFN.